City Council Member Corey Johnson.
Good evening. It is a very special honor to be here in support of an incredible organization, GMHC, and to have the opportunity to present one of the other 2016 Larry Kramer Activism Awards to a true hero in our community. He is a civil rights activist, a world-renowned filmmaker, a leader, and to me, he is a mentor, a role model, and most of all, a close friend. Dustin Lance Black and I have known each other for 13 years. It was in 2003 that I had decided very whimsically that I was going to leave New York, drive to Los Angeles, and try to create a new life there. And within 2 weeks of moving to Los Angeles, I had met Lance Black. Lance was young in his career, and I was 20 years old, not even 21 yet. I decided to only stay in LA for a couple of months, but during my time there, Lance and I became close friends. And I knew then that Lance had the determination, talent, and passion to make a big impact in the world. And boy, has he made an impact. Millions of people around the world were touched by Lance's groundbreaking and Oscar-winning film, Milk. And I think it's important just to say, because a lot of people may not know this, but Milk was released, of course, in 2008, which was around the time of Prop 8, but Lance had been working on the film for years. And when he used to visit New York, he would stay with me in my little tiny fifth floor walk-up studio apartment in Chelsea. And I would wake up in the mornings, this was 3, 4, 5 years before the film was released, and Lance would be working away on my couch, on his laptop, in a notebook, writing the script to Milk. And he said, I am going to get this film made, I am going to get this film made, I am going to get this film made, and he got his film made. His film is an example of how art can change the world. Lance introduced a new generation of LGBT people and non-LGBT people to a San Francisco supervisor named Harvey Milk. He told Milk's story, our community story, in all its humanity, its personality, its gravity. He introduced the world to people like Cleve Jones and Ann Cronenberg. And in the wake of Proposition 8, in some of the darkest days of the struggle for marriage equality, Lance's art gave us hope. And his Oscar speech in front of millions, he used the opportunity to speak directly to young LGBT people in America, telling them that no matter what their church or their government or anyone else told them, in unforgettable words, you are beautiful, wonderful creatures of value, and that no matter what anyone tells you, God does love you, and very soon, I promise you, you will have equal rights federally across this great nation of ours. And boy, was that prophetic in many ways. Lance was doing more than just promoting equality. He was doing more than making art about equality. Lance was sitting down with people like Bruce Cohen and Chad Griffin and others to plot out a response to Proposition 8. The result was the American Foundation for Equal Rights, or AFER, of which Lance was a founding board member. AFER immediately began to take the battle to the courts. And despite some opposition, they decided to hire Ted Holson and David Boies, and they filed a lawsuit, Perry versus Schwarzenegger, which was argued the same day as our amazing board chair, Roberta Kaplan, argued Edie Windsor's case. And the rest is history. His play portraying the closing arguments of Perry versus Schwarzenegger, the trial, entitled 8, was staged in schools and theaters and community centers. His work was winning hearts and minds as marriage equality made its way to the United States Supreme Court. Lance has also played a leading role on the issue of suicide among LGBTQ youth, as well as the fight against the unbelievable discrimination and violence faced by LGBTQ people internationally. His screenplay, very early in his career, for the biopic of Pedro Zamora, who was on The Real World on MTV, the openly gay Cuban-American AIDS educator and television personality, told Pedro's story to a new generation of young people. Lance is one of my dearest friends. I rarely get nervous speaking, but I'm nervous tonight because I care so much about him, and I am so proud of all the work he has done. It is my pleasure to present one of the 2016 Larry Kramer Activism Awards to my dear friend, an incredible, incredible man, Dustin Lance Black.
Hey, everybody. I just want to add one detail that you left out, Corey, which is when he came to Los Angeles so many years ago, we met in a little thing called AOL M4M 18 to 25 chat room. He was really cute. He had on like football pads and his picture and everything. I was like, hell yeah. Thank you, Corey. I hope you're blushing. I just flew in from Vancouver today, where I'm shooting When We Rise for ABC, which is where I've vanished off to for the past 3 years. Somehow I've gotten ABC to tell the history of the modern LGBT movement in an 8-hour miniseries that features so many of you in this room and so many of us who we've lost who are no longer in this room with us. But it also means that I have to get right back onto a plane in a minute. So whoever has the desserts, if you could box one up, I would love that. This is such a tremendous honor, and partly because of the name that's on this award. Larry, my God, man, I adore you. You piss me off so much sometimes, and you excite me, and you light me up with your work and your anger when it's necessary. And you agitate when necessary, and it's something that I learned. I grew up Mormon, man. I was really shy. I was really bad at agitating. I was taught to blend in and be quiet, right? And I thought I was really good at that for a long time until this Proposition 8 case came along, and I decided to start to fight. And we got all of this backlash early on, saying it was too soon for a Supreme Court case. I'm sure, Roberta, you heard the same thing. But I had the luck of sitting down with Julian Bond. Do we remember our great friend Julian Bond? We lost last year. And he looked me in the eye and he said, Lance, good things do not come to those who wait. They come to those who agitate. And I started to agitate, and Larry, you have been such a beacon for me. You've been such a guiding light for me in how to agitate. And I don't always agree with you, and sometimes I get it wrong. You know, I was agitating recently on Twitter, and Sam Smith sort of didn't appreciate it. But I'll work harder. I'll work harder to get it right. You know, when I was a kid, my mom was an immunologist. And she was we moved to the Bay Area because something was going on. And I didn't know what was going on. I was just a kid. I was in the theater. And I started apprenticing at ACT in the Western Stage and all these wonderful theaters where I had these great mentors who were either directors or production designers. And they were teaching me season after season, but some of them stopped coming back. And no one told me where they went, so I would bond with a new mentor and a new director and a new production designer, and then they didn't show up the next season. And no one told me where they went. And it wasn't for years that I found out that they were dying in silence, in isolation. They were dying in invisibility and some in shame. And it broke my heart. And it almost broke my spirit. You know, 30 years ago, silence and isolation truly equaled death. Today, treatment ought to, it could, it should equal prevention, shouldn't it? But we still have barriers standing in our way. Barriers we have to break down, like poverty and racism and stigma, sometimes stigma now coming from our own. It must be broken down, and I look to you again, Larry, for inspiration. Larry, you said in a quote that is a guiding principle to me, you said, "Without a history, we cannot be a people." And too often we lose our history. And we don't write about our history because we're nostalgic, because we just miss the past. No, we write about history because in it is hidden the lessons of how we can stop fucking up and start getting it right. The lessons of so many who we've lost, who ought to be in this room today, are not lost. They are here with us if we pay attention to our history, and they can guide us, and they can guide future generations to break down the discrimination and the homophobia and the racism that keeps AIDS a plague. And we can finally put an end to it by knowing who we are and where we come from and paying attention to those lessons. So thank you so much, Larry, for giving me the bravery to piss a few people off, to look back in the history books and bring our history back to life. I guarantee you that is what I will dedicate my life to doing, is making sure that the lives, all the lives that are not with us here today, that those lessons will live on, that GMHC will live on in my work, in our hearts, and in the future, so that we can finally put an end to HIV and AIDS and all of the things that keep it alive. Thank you so very much, GMHC. It's an honor of my life. Thank you, Larry.